Hey, what is going on, everybody? This is Beanie and welcome back to another video, guys. Today we are going to be talking about something that is sure to bring in dislikes from Cubs fans, but we're going to be talking about Kris Bryant and whether or not the Cubs should trade him. Now, I know that sounds insane because, we're talking about Kris Bryant here, one of the best third basemen in all of baseball, but there are some extenuating circumstances that make trading him at least an idea that the Cubs should consider, especially considering the fact that Kris Bryant has basically come out and said that he isn't interested in talking about an extension with the Cubs, that he is going to explore the free agent market when he becomes a free agent. Those of you who have followed my channel for a long time know that I'm a big advocate of the surplus value model, so using that model, let's figure out how much Kris Bryant should be worth in trade. So the Cubs have 2 more years of arbitration control over Kris Bryant, and it can be kind of difficult to pinpoint exactly how much a guy is going to be paid in arbitration, but going from previous guidelines and everything, I think it's safe to say that around $44 million is going to be about what Kris Bryant gets paid. Maybe that's a little bit light, but I think that it's actually to his value benefit for him to get paid a little bit less. This year, he's projected to make $18.5 million, and then next year I'm projecting him at about 25.5, so that adds up to $44 million. Now that we know that, how valuable is he projected to be? Fangraphs has him pegged at around 4.8 WAR for next year. I think that might be a little bit light. I know that he hasn't been as good the past 2 years as he was in his first 3 years, but I feel relatively comfortable projecting him out for 5 WAR over the next 2 years for a total of 10 WAR. And at $9 million per WAR, that gives him a raw value of about $90 million. So subtract $44 million from that $90 million and you get a surplus value of about $46 million. But we're talking about Kris Bryant here. We're talking about an absolute bona fide stud, a superstar. So you're not going to get just $46 million in surplus value. There is going to be a bit of a contender's premium added onto that for whatever team trades for him. And I think that because we're talking about Kris Bryant, it's going to be more substantial than the general 10% that we see in most trades. So I'm pegging his contender's premium at around 20%. And when you factor in that 20% contender's premium, you arrive at a surplus value total of about $55 million, which doesn't seem like a lot, but for a guy who's only controlled for 2 more seasons, that is an ass load. But what does that mean in terms of the return that the Cubs are going to get if they do decide to trade Kris Bryant? Well, I'm going to give you 4 different types of trade packages that the Cubs could realistically go for. Now, if the Cubs decide that they want to just get prospects in return, this is what I think they could get. I think that they could get 2 top 50 to 70 prospects in all of baseball, which is a very healthy package. Or if they want to get like just one big guy, they could get a top 5 to 20 prospect plus a little bit of filler added in at the back end, maybe a 45 FV, which would be ranked in like the 90th to 125th top prospect rank. And for those who don't know, a 45 FV prospect is a guy who's projected to be just slightly below MLB average, but maybe could grow into an average or maybe even slightly above average MLB player when we're talking about, prospects are, always very unpredictable, but a 45 FV is a very solid prospect. Or the Cubs could try to get like a mix of prospects and MLB talent. And if they do decide to do that, I think they could get something like 1 short-term 3-win player plus a prospect in like the 80 to the back end of the top 100, let's say. So one guy on like a 1-2 year contract who's a 3-win player plus a top 100 prospect, but just maybe in the back end. Or if they decide to go for just MLB talent only, which is, I think, probably the most reasonable thing because the Cubs are in the middle of a contention window. And it is weird to talk about, let's just say this off the jump, it is kind of weird to talk about trading a player of Kris Bryant's caliber when you have a team that is in the middle of a contention window. But I'm going to talk about why they should consider it in just a minute. But if they do decide to go for MLB talent, I do think that they could get one long-term 2 to 3 3-win player, plus a little bit of filler, maybe prospect filler, or maybe like a role player, like a lefty specialist, or a solid back end of the rotation starter or something like that. And then the final type of trade that they might do would just be like a dollar swap to get money off the books, because the Cubs are in a bit of a precarious financial situation when it comes to some of their contracts. Maybe they decide to attach a bad contract to Kris Bryant in order to move more money off the books and be more aggressive in this year's free agent market. And even if they do that, maybe they could get a solid, short-term 3-win player back. Maybe, I don't know, you'd have to find the right kind of team to get something like that done, but it is possible. And if you ask me which one of these is the most likely, I think if they shopped him around enough, they could find a team willing to take on a bad contract in order to get Kris Bryant, while also giving the Cubs a solid player in return. And I think that might be the most likely outcome in something like this if they do decide to trade Kris Bryant. So why would the Cubs decide to trade him? Well, first of all, the Cubs they're in the middle of their contention window, but when you look at their roster, it's very difficult to see a path towards competing for a World Series right now. If you look at their roster and their payroll, they have almost $100 million sunk in to players that are aging and either aren't very good, or they're very close to not being very good, or they're just not worth the money that you're paying them. Specifically, I'm talking about guys like Jason Hayward, Yu Darvish, John Lester. I know John Lester is John Lester, but still, he hasn't been that great. Tyler Chatwood, Craig Kimbrell, Jose Quintana, to a lesser extent, Jose Quintana. They just have a bunch of players who are owed a lot of money that are really old and not very good, or a mixture of not very good, really old, getting older. It's just not a very good mix, and they're owed a ton of money. So it's hard to look at that and say, yeah, this is a team that's going to compete for a World Series. And if you're not a team that's going to be competing for a World Series, then why would you hang on to a guy that is basically telling you to your face, yeah, in 2 years, I'm going to walk? So despite the fact that Cubs fans might not want to hear it, it does make some sense to trade Kris Bryant. But let's look at the benefits of trading Kris Bryant and the drawbacks and kind of see where I fall on this. First of all, you're going to free up some money. This is the benefits. You're going to free up some money, and you could free up even more money if you decide to attach a bad contract in lieu of getting maybe a better player back. It also maximizes Kris Bryant's value. If you're going to be wasting Kris Bryant's value on a team that's not going to be competing for a World Series, not saying that the Cubs can't, just saying that it's hard to see right now, given how good some of the NL is and how great some of the AL is. It's just kind of hard to see a path for them. So if you trade him, you're going to maximize his value. Instead of just the $46 million in surplus value that you're going to get from Kris Bryant in the next 2 years, you could get 55, maybe even 60 million in surplus value. And not only does it maximize it, it extends it over a longer period of time, which would basically, in effect, extend the Cubs' competitive window. So basically, once Kris Bryant, what I mean by that is when Kris Bryant walks in 2021, the Cubs' window might effectively be over. But if you trade him and you get back longer term pieces and maybe cheaper pieces, and you can add around that some longer term pieces that may be a little bit more expensive, you start to see a roster that maybe can compete for a World Series this year. And if not this year, definitely next year or the year after that. And if you can find the right suitor, you can get back an MLB ready piece and a few prospects to replenish a farm that badly needs it. The Cubs farm has not been very good since 2016 or 2015, whenever they decided to trade away all those guys for Aroldis Chapman and Jose Quintana, and all those guys graduated and started kind of churning up into the MLB. Their farm system has not been very good at all. So if you could replenish that and get some more long-term value, that's also another, oh shit, my mic. That's also another way that you could go about extending your window. It might also eliminate the need for the Cubs to really rebuild, if you know what I mean. Because like I said, when Kris Bryant walks, you got to think a lot of these contracts, yes, some of them will be coming off the books and the Cubs will have money to spend, but it's very difficult to build a contender purely through free agency, and the Cubs don't really have the farm to supplement their team right now. So after Kris Bryant walks, you're going to have an okay foundation with guys like Javier Baez and dudes like that. But it's still not going to be really a World Series contender. But if you could get some long-term talent for Kris Bryant, guys that go beyond 2021, you're probably never going to have to rebuild, at least in the near future. Okay, now let's look at the drawbacks. First of all, you are going to lose a superstar. You're going to lose your face of the franchise, and that is always an incredibly difficult proposition for any franchise, because not only do they help you win, they sell tickets and they make you money, they sell jerseys. It's not a good thing, and sometimes it can be a bad look as well whenever, this guy identifies with this one team and then you just go ahead and trade him like he meant nothing. I know the Oakland A's get a lot of criticism for that. They traded Josh Donaldson and all that jazz. But yeah, that is a major drawback to this. Another drawback is that, yeah, you might free up some money, but you are going to have to find a replacement for him, and it's not that easy to replace that much production in your lineup. Kris Bryant, like I said, he's a superstar, and you're probably not going to find another superstar to replace him, especially not for $18 million. And that kind of leads me to my next drawback, is that it will hurt the present. It will hurt the Cubs in 2020. It's just, they won't be as good of a team in 2020 if they trade Kris Bryant, unless they can figure out a really creative way to free up enough money to get a really good free agent and then maybe a really good player in return that is kind of cheap. And there are ways to make the Cubs better in 2020 and beyond by trading Kris Bryant, but it's going to take a pretty unique set of circumstances, and I think the most likely outcome is that the Cubs aren't as good in 2020 if they do trade him. And then the final drawback is that it deconcentrates value. Everyone knows that it's better to have one player worth 5 WAR than 2 players worth 2.5 WAR. Even though you're getting the same amount of value, having it spread over 2 roster spots is never as good as having it in 1 roster spot. And that kind of goes back to the point that I was making, that it probably is going to make the Cubs not as good in 2020. So that leads me up to the final question that I posed at the beginning of this video. Should the Cubs trade Kris Bryant? And despite all that I just said, I'm leaning towards no. At least not right now. They don't have to trade him this offseason. Like I said, they have 2 years of control left, so they have time to kind of evaluate. Now, it is true that Kris Bryant is going to lose trade value every single day that you hold on to him. That is true. But I think that it's worth it to be willing to give up a bit of his value in order to evaluate where your team is going to be in 2020. Now, if the Cubs go out and they're competing in 2020 and they're looking at a division title and maybe a potential run in the playoffs, maybe some guys overperform and they're starting to look really good, then hold on to him. There's no reason to trade him if you have a competitive team that has a shot at a World Series. At that point, you're going to be looking to add. Now, if you go out and you're playing 500 ball or below 500 ball, and it looks like the Cubs, it's like leaning towards the end of that competitive window, or maybe this is just like a bad year or something like that, and July rolls around and it's just not looking good from any circumstance, then trade Kris Bryant. You can get a lot back for him, and you can make 2021's roster look a lot better. You can make 2022 and beyond look a lot better by trading Kris Bryant. At that point, I would start advocating for it. But right now, I would take a bit more of a wait-and-see approach with Kris and just see what he and the rest of the team can do in 2020, and then make your decision in July. But if you hold on to him in July, then you're probably in for the long haul, because what you get back in 2021 isn't going to be worth trading him Probably. You know, that would be kind of like the Manny Machado trade. Maybe it's worth it, but I think the Cubs would have to be pretty bad for them to consider that. So yeah, don't trade him now, but if the right circumstances are in place in July, then you trade him. Anyways, guys, that is going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and please don't leave a dislike without watching the entire video. If you think I'm an idiot at the end of it, then you can leave a dislike. As soon as I put out that Madison Bumgarner video, I had like 5 dislikes come in, like bam, 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 just because I said Madison Bumgarner wasn't that good. I don't even think they watched the video. But anyways, yeah, I love you guys. Please sub. Please follow me on Twitter at Beanie Antics. It would really help. I'd love to get my Twitter followers above 2,000 before MLB 20 comes out. That would be great. But anyways, I love you guys. I will see you guys later. But until then, peace.